They told us comets were harmless wanderers, dirty snowballs drifting through the dark. But this one isn't harmless. The readings don't fit, the trajectory doesn't make sense, and the closer it comes, the clearer the truth becomes. 3i Atlas doesn't behave like nature. It behaves like intent. An intent at interstellar speed could erase humanity in a single night. Like this video if the thought unsettles you. Drop a comment. If 3i Atlas is a machine, do you think it was sent to watch us or to erase us? And subscribe, because what we uncover next will take us deeper into the patterns that decide humanity's survival. To the astronomers who first followed it, 3i Atlas looked like a pale streak swallowed by the star fields. To anyone outside the observatories, it would have looked like nothing more than a wandering speck, just another entry in the ever-growing catalogue of comets and asteroids. But beneath that faint shimmer, the numbers told a story that refused to fit into the world of chance. This was not an ordinary comet, not even an ordinary visitor. The designation alone, an interstellar object, already marked it as rare beyond rare. Yet it was the path and the chemistry that sent shivers through those who calculated them. Natural interstellar objects should behave like stones skimming across water. They flash in, curve briefly under the tug of the sun, and then escape back into the dark. Their angles are chaotic, their approach careless, their departures final. What 3i Atlas does instead feels unnervingly precise. It enters fast, blisteringly fast, more than 60 kilometers per second, quick enough to circle Earth in less than a quarter of an hour. Speed like that is expected. What is not expected is where that velocity takes it. Instead of flinging past at some improbable tilt, it threads a path straight through the inner solar system, brushing past the orbits of multiple planets as though following a survey line. By late October 2025, it will dip inside the orbit of Mars, graze uncomfortably close to Earth's neighbourhood, and then swing back outward as though ticking boxes on an invisible checklist. The odds of such a course happening naturally are nearly non-existent. Statisticians ran simulations until the servers strained. The probabilities collapsed into numbers so small they were hard to express without resorting to scientific notation. Less than 5 in 100,000. Numbers like that don't suggest coincidence. They whisper something else: planning, intent, purpose. If you look at the trajectory without bias, it is almost indistinguishable from reconnaissance. That thought is disturbing enough, but then the details of the physics make it worse. At such speeds, even the tiniest push matters. A whisper of gas venting into the void, a jet of vapour from the sunlit side can alter the path dramatically. A billiard ball racing across a table will change its destination with the lightest flick. At 60 kilometers per second, 3i Atlas is a billiard ball of cosmic proportions. For natural comets, this outgassing is messy, chaotic, unpredictable. Plumes burst from random fissures producing random shifts. But the chemistry of 3i Atlas tilts the rules. Its ices are not the expected water-dominated mix. They are loaded with carbon dioxide, a volatile that sublimates more easily and produces stronger thrust per molecule. It is, in effect, a more efficient thruster than the frozen bodies we're used to. The unsettling implication is that this composition acts like a built-in steering system. It allows for tiny, cumulative course corrections over immense distances of time. Imagine a probe disguised as a comet, nudging itself subtly closer to planetary orbits with each swing of starlight. What we see from Earth would look natural enough to reassure cautious minds, but underneath would be the unmistakable precision of control. Astronomy thrives on rhythm and pattern, and it is precisely that rhythm which 3i Atlas disrupts. Its timing is uncanny. It did not arrive in the Stone Age when humanity was little more than scattered villages, nor in the medieval era when we barely understood the stars at all. It arrives now, at the very moment our species is preparing to leave its cradle. Now, as we build probes, map exoplanets, and begin speaking openly about colonizing Mars. This is the exact stage when a civilization becomes noticeable to the cosmos and at the same time vulnerable. The coincidence is too sharp. The geometry sharpens the blade. Not only does 3I Atlas approach Earth's orbit, but it passes by Venus, by Mars, and brushes close to Jupiter's realm. Each encounter looks less like a chaotic accident and more like a tour, a reconnaissance sweep. And then there is the anomaly of its light. Astronomers measure polarization, how light scatters when it reflects off dust and ice. 3I Atlas bends that light in ways no other comet does. Extreme negative polarization, a property so rare it exists in no natural catalogue. Either this body is made of substances foreign to the solar system, or its surface has been engineered to confuse our instruments. Neither answer reassures. When you assemble all these fragments, the trajectory too precise, the chemistry too strange, the scattering of a light too alien, you arrive at a possibility many prefer not to say aloud: intention. The orbit suggests a survey. The composition suggests control. The anomalies suggest design. One can bend in circles trying to preserve natural explanations, inventing exotic ice models, improbable alignments, unexplored categories of dust. But the pattern persists like a stain. It moves less like a rock and more like a device. If it is a device, then its purpose cannot be benign. The role of reconnaissance is always the same. Information gathering precedes action. Scouts ride ahead of armies. They do not come without something to follow. And so the mind drifts inevitably toward the darker thought. What is 3I Atlas preparing for? The nightmare scenario is brutally simple. If an object this fast, this massive, and this precisely placed were nudged onto a collision course with Earth, the result would not be catastrophe in the sense of earthquakes or hurricanes. It would be the final page of human history. The Chicxulub asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs arrived at less than half this velocity and released energy measured in hundreds of millions of megatons. 3I Atlas, smaller perhaps but swifter, carries kinetic energy far beyond even that. Energy scales with the square of velocity. Double the speed and you quadruple the impact. At 60 kilometers per second, the difference is apocalyptic. It would not be a regional disaster, not a war, not a famine. It would be a planetary erasure. Oceans would flash to steam. Firestorms would circle the globe. The skies would darken with ash until sunlight itself was choked away. Civilization would collapse not over years or decades, but within days. Humanity would vanish almost as quickly as a species of birds in a storm. This is what the numbers imply. This is what makes 3I Atlas different. The calendar fixes the dread. October 29th, 2025. That is when the object makes its closest brush with Earth's domain. Tens of millions of kilometers may sound safely remote, but in the emptiness of space, it is a hair's breadth. Close enough that a small adjustment, a deliberate nudge, could change the script entirely. One path is a harmless pass, a strange story for the news. Another path is a strike that would end everything we know, and so we watch. Telescopes track the faint blur. Software calculates new positions, refining the arc of its approach. Observers whisper about the probabilities, about the anomalies, about the unsettling possibility that this is no comet at all. What cannot be measured is intent. Instruments read light and motion, but not purpose. They cannot tell us whether 3I Atlas is an innocent wanderer or something that has been steering toward us all along. That uncertainty is the true danger, because if it is more than natural, then humanity's fate may already be sealed. And if it is not, the fact that we cannot tell the difference should disturb us even more. The cosmos may be about to deliver not just a rock from the void, but a verdict. And when it comes, it will arrive at interstellar speed. When the first spectroscopic readings of 3I Atlas were released, they looked like errors. Comets are supposed to be predictable in their filth. Frozen water mixed with dust, with carbon dioxide appearing in thin traces. What the instruments recorded instead was the opposite. an object whose composition seemed flipped upside down. Carbon dioxide outgassed not in the faint whispers scientists expect, but in torrents, while water played only a minor role. The ratio was so unusual that some dismissed it outright. Perhaps the instruments had been saturated. Perhaps contamination crept into the detectors. Perhaps a calibration glitch had tricked astronomers into seeing ghosts in the spectrum. But the numbers held. The signature persisted night after night, observatory after observatory. 4 parts carbon dioxide for every 1 part water. No comet in the catalogue behaves like this, and that single fact is enough to alter everything. Because chemistry dictates behaviour. If 3I Atlas is driven more by carbon dioxide than by water, it will not act like a comet. It will act like a machine with a different set of controls. Water ice sublimates slowly, releasing gentle jets that shift orbits by tiny increments. Carbon dioxide erupts violently, producing thrust far stronger relative to its mass. That means the jets from 3I Atlas have the efficiency of miniature rockets, capable of altering its course with precision impossible for a water-dominated body. In the language of astrodynamics, it has beta delta V. In the language of dread, it can steer. That steering capacity unlocks terrifying scenarios. If its course is being fine-tuned by such eruptions, then its apparently impossible trajectory through the solar system is not impossible at all. It is chosen. A natural body would stumble randomly past one planet's orbit, maybe 2. 3I Atlas threads several in sequence, as though moving along waypoints. Its chemistry is not an accident. It is the fuel of intent. Then there is the colour. Comets typically glow white or bluish from dust and simple molecules scattering sunlight. 3I Atlas shifted from a dull red to an eerie green as it drew closer to the sun. The green is not the glow of friendly auroras. It is the mark of cyanide radicals bleeding into the vacuum. Instruments detected cyanogen flowing away from the body at tens of grams per second, climbing in intensity as the object warmed. Cyanide, one of the most potent poisons known to terrestrial life, spraying invisibly into the solar wind. Poison in space sounds almost theatrical, but the implications are serious. To humans, cyanide is death at the cellular level. It smothers the machinery of respiration, halting energy production in the blood and brain. Released into a planetary atmosphere even in dilute form, it becomes a tool of mass extinction. Imagine a probe capable of seeding such chemicals on worlds it passes. A chemical knife slipped quietly into the air until biology itself falters. Nickel was also found in its outgassing, shed at grams per second. Not flakes of dust, not random mineral inclusions, but metallic emission. Nickel is not an accident of geology. It is the backbone of high-grade alloys, the metal of turbines, engines, batteries. In the context of a natural comet, nickel is unusual. In the context of suspicion, it looks like supply. A resource being vented, tested, or repurposed for construction. Perhaps a side effect of industrial processes we cannot see, occurring beneath a crust designed to mimic a comet's surface. The combination is too suggestive. Cyanide, the precursor of complex organic chemistry, but also a perfect bioweapon. Nickel, the foundation of strong alloys. Carbon dioxide, the ideal propellant. Taken together, they paint the outline of something neither entirely dead nor entirely alive. A probe camouflaged as a comet, bleeding toxins and metals as it prepares for a role we cannot identify. And then comes the matter of timing. Based on its current velocity, 3I Atlas would have entered the solar system roughly 8,000 years ago. 8,000 years. The very span when human beings shifted from scattered tribes to settled civilizations, when agriculture rose, when writing first etched itself into clay, when myths of gods descending from the sky were first told. It is one thing for a comet to appear at random. It is another for one to take thousands of years to thread its way inward and arrive precisely at the moment our species has achieved global technology. Coincidences do not usually run this deep. They look like patience. They look like observation. If something has been watching us all along, then the strange chemistry becomes more menacing still. Carbon dioxide jets for steering, cyanide for biological interference, nickel for manufacturing. It is an inventory of tools, not a list of random emissions. Perhaps the object is testing conditions, bleeding chemicals as markers or calibration signals. Perhaps it is experimenting on the solar wind itself, gauging how toxins disperse, how metals ionize, how energy flows. What looks like meaningless venting could be deliberate probes of environment, rehearsals for a larger deployment. Scientists still strain to bend these findings into natural explanations. They talk of exotic ices preserved in deep cold, of unusual mineral inclusions, of mechanisms we have simply never seen before. That may be true, but for each new natural hypothesis, the data insists on repeating itself. The strange ratios persist. The cyanide continues to grow stronger as it approaches the sun. The nickel signatures refuse to vanish. Each attempt to explain away the reading sounds thinner than the one before. If we drop the pretense and allow the possibility of intent, the puzzle sharpens. We are left staring at a body that carries poisons, alloys, and thrusters in one shell. We are left with the uncomfortable possibility that what we are watching is not a comet at all, but an engineered courier, its disguise slipping only because our instruments have grown sharp enough to catch the details. And if that is true, then we must ask what message it carries. Is it here to seed life, scattering complex molecules like an ancient gardener? Is it here to sterilize, drifting from star to star and preparing worlds for colonization by species unknown? Or is it here only to watch, bleeding signals and toxins as experiments while it waits for instructions from somewhere else? No answer comforts. Each possibility loops back into the same shadow. 3i Atlas is not behaving as a comet should, and when things in the sky do not behave, civilizations tremble. For thousands of years, people looked upward and invented stories to make sense of comets, harbingers of war, omens of plague, divine warnings. Today we cloak those same instincts in the language of spectroscopy and statistical models, but the fear is identical. We know in our bones when something doesn't belong. The difference now is that we have numbers instead of myths. Numbers that tell us the chemistry is wrong, the emissions are wrong, the probabilities are wrong. Numbers that say with quiet certainty, this object should not exist. And yet there it is, hissing cyanide into space, dropping nickel like breadcrumbs, steering itself closer with bursts of carbon dioxide no other comet can match. The night sky does not often lie. When it does, the lie is usually small enough to ignore. But 3i Atlas is lying on a scale we cannot dismiss, pretending to be what it is not. And in the weeks ahead, as it nears the sun and vanishes into the glare, we may have to face the possibility that the truth behind that lie is nothing less than our own erasure. The alien chemistry of this comet unsettles because it forces us to rethink what a comet is supposed to be. For centuries, comets were dirty snowballs, crude relics of the early solar system. They were time capsules of ice and dust, reminders of how planets were assembled billions of years ago. They carried water, yes, but always in familiar ratios. They scattered simple molecules like carbon monoxide and methane, but never in overwhelming quantities. Their behaviour could be messy, sometimes spectacular, but always grounded in the same rules. What this object presents is a deliberate inversion of those rules, as though some intelligence took the template of a comet and rewired it. The anomalies do not end with cyanide and nickel. As the object approached the sun, astronomers expected its spectrum to shift gradually with temperature, showing the usual progression of water vapour, dust tails, and ionized gases. Instead, the readings came in bursts. Outgassing events erupted with suspicious regularity, sometimes pulsing like a heartbeat. Natural comets vent in chaotic rhythms, random fissures opening and closing, sunlight cracking surfaces at unpredictable intervals. But 3i Atlas vented in patterns, each episode timed as though responding to hidden commands. A burst of carbon dioxide here, a pulse of cyanide there, followed by silence before repeating the cycle. The alien chemistry was no longer just a strange mixture of substances. It began to resemble an operating system. And if those pulses were signals, then the question becomes, signals to whom? The possibility that 3i Atlas could be communicating, either with other objects nearby or with some receiver far across interstellar space, forces us to imagine it as more than a lone traveller. Each vent, each flash of chemical light could be a packet of information, coded not in radio but in the language of chemistry itself. A chemical Morse code played out against the vacuum, too subtle for us to recognise until it was already underway. If that is true, then we are not simply watching a comet unravel under heat. We are eavesdropping on a transmission not meant for us. The alien chemistry also hints at function beyond signalling. Consider the cyanide again. On Earth, cyanide is both poison and precursor. It is lethal to most life, yet it also sits at the root of prebiotic chemistry, one of the molecules that can kickstart the formation of amino acids and nucleotides. To release cyanide into the solar wind is to play with the boundary between creation and destruction. One interpretation is that 3i Atlas is sowing seeds, scattering precursors into space the way dandelions scatter fluff. Another interpretation is darker. The same molecules that might help life arise on a barren world could be used as targeted toxins against an inhabited one. Cyanide is flexible that way. It can cradle the spark of biology, or it can snuff it out. Then there is nickel. Our industrial world leans heavily on nickel without thinking about it. It strengthens steel, stabilizes batteries, resists corrosion in spacecraft alloys. It is what you use when you want durability under stress. To find nickel in the exhaust of 3i Atlas is like finding steel dust in the wake of a passing ship. It suggests construction, abrasion, manufacture. Perhaps the object is shedding waste from internal machinery. Perhaps it is deliberately venting metal for smaller craft to collect. Or perhaps it is breaking itself down, releasing the raw materials required to assemble new devices. Whatever the explanation, the alien chemistry here is not idle. It does not match the chaotic sputtering of natural bodies. It suggests processes at work, processes with objectives. Even the glow of green light, haunting as it is, betrays an order beneath the surface. Natural comets glow green from diatomic carbon, a fragile molecule quickly destroyed by sunlight. The glow of 3i Atlas is not only persistent but intensifying, as though sustained by continuous replenishment. It is less a reflection of solar input and more a signal flare, maintained deliberately. The eerie emerald hue does not fade as one would expect. It grows, a lantern burning brighter as it draws nearer, like a beacon in the dark. To call this simply unusual chemistry would be to downplay the weight of it. This is chemistry acting with intent. This is the alien chemistry at work. Some theorists argue that 3i Atlas could be testing us without us realizing it. By releasing chemicals we can detect, it forces us to react, to observe, to decode. Our telescopes become participants in an experiment. Our data the proof that an intelligent species is paying attention. The emissions then serve two purposes. They alter the environment, but they also draw out a response, a way of knocking on the door and listening to the echo. In that sense, the alien chemistry is a conversation starter, a way of confirming that we are here and awake enough to notice. But if it is a test, then what comes after the test? When a laboratory rat finds the food at the end of the maze, the scientist records its performance and decides whether to proceed. If 3i Atlas is watching how we respond to cyanide and nickel trails, then perhaps it is assessing us the way we assess other animals. Are they intelligent? Are they organised? Are they worth further engagement or elimination? The most unnerving part of the alien chemistry is how it blurs the line between life and machine. On one hand, its emissions echo the metabolism of living organisms, taking in sunlight, releasing byproducts, changing colour as though undergoing cellular transformation. On the other, the regularity and utility of those emissions speak of engineering. It looks like a comet, but it breathes like something alive. It engineers like something built. It masquerades as both at once, denying us the comfort of a clear category. That ambiguity may not be accidental. Disguise is more effective when it unsettles the viewer. The deeper we peer into its spectrum, the less reassuring the answers become. What began as curiosity, why does this comet look strange, evolves into unease. The data piles up, but the explanations collapse. The alien fingerprints are not in the surface we photograph, but in the molecules it exhales. Every gram of cyanide, every atom of nickel, every burst of carbon dioxide is a message. Not necessarily one we can read, but one that leaves no doubt that something about 3I Atlas is deliberate. And that is why the alien chemistry matters so much. Because chemistry is not decoration. Chemistry is destiny. It defines how matter moves, how it interacts, how it changes. When chemistry looks engineered, destiny begins to look engineered as well. And the destiny painted by 3I Atlas is not one of random ice wandering through space. It is one of a system in motion, a system with goals we're not invited to share. Ancient peoples read comets as messengers of death and ruin. We call them objects of analysis, though the old shiver persists. The green glow, the poisonous trails, the metallic breath. All of it speaks in the same language the ancients heard when they gazed upward. This is not a good sign. This is a warning written in the atoms themselves. And as the object dives closer to the sun, vanishing soon into the glare where we cannot track its chemistry, we are left with the same dread as our ancestors. Something in the sky is telling us we may not have long. The interstellar messenger's chemistry is more than a curiosity. It is the closest thing we have to a confession. Every spectrum we capture, every faint line of light absorbed or emitted by 3I Atlas is testimony to what it is and what it is not. When astronomers compared the object's readings against databases of known comets, the gaps stood out like missing teeth. Too much carbon dioxide, too little water, cyanide bleeding into the void, metals in its wake. It is a recipe not seen in natural kitchens of the solar system. To call it strange would be generous. To call it deliberate might be more accurate. This is where the comparison to other visitors becomes crucial. Oumuamua, the first interstellar body, was bizarre enough. Its elongated shape, its acceleration without jets, its reflective surface. Borisov, the second, looked more like a conventional comet, but still carried unusual volatiles. Both could be explained away as exotic relics of distant star systems. Unlikely, yes, but within the realm of possibility. 3I Atlas shatters that fragile plausibility. Its chemistry does not resemble a cousin from another solar nursery. It resembles a machine dressed in comet skin. Think of what its emissions tell us. Carbon dioxide erupting in steady bursts is thrust. Cyanide, escalating as it nears the sun, is toxin or tool. Nickel, a construction metal, leaks as though waste from hidden engines. Each substance carries utility. Taken together, they form a kit. If 3I Atlas were natural, the pattern would be arbitrary, messy, coincidental. Instead, the interstellar messenger's chemistry is functional. Each molecule does something useful. Scientists struggle with this interpretation because it drags astronomy into territory it has no protocol for. Telescopes are meant to measure rocks and gas, not intent. But intent is what the data begins to suggest. The jets of carbon dioxide could steer, the cyanide could sterilize, the nickel could build, the green glow could signal. The spectrum is no longer just the fingerprint of a rock. It is the operating manual of a probe. And then there is the regularity. The outgassing of this comet is not chaotic but rhythmic. Pulses of vapour emerge at intervals that almost mimic an internal clock. Some observers dismissed this as coincidence, the result of surface fractures opening under heat in symmetrical patterns. But comets are not metronomes. They do not keep time. The repetition feels less like geology and more like software, a cycle, a protocol, a system ticking away as it follows its trajectory through our system. If the interstellar messenger's chemistry is a code, then perhaps we're already being spoken to in a language we cannot yet translate. Imagine communication not through radio waves or laser beams, but through chemistry itself, designed to be visible to any civilization, advanced enough to split light with a spectrograph. Perhaps 3i Atlas does not care if we read the message correctly. Perhaps it only cares that we notice at all. The act of detecting the irregularities proves we're awake, proves we're intelligent enough to understand that something here does not belong. But once you accept that this chemistry might be intentional, the darker implications follow. Reconnaissance always precedes action. No scout is sent unless something waits behind. If 3i Atlas is bleeding metals and poisons as a signal, then what is it signaling for? Reinforcements? Instructions? Activation? It has been travelling for thousands of years, and now, at the precise moment, human civilization begins reaching into space. It shows its hand. To believe this is coincidence requires more faith than to believe it is design. The interstellar messenger's chemistry also tells us about its resilience. Natural comets crumble as they near the sun. They fragment, collapse, break into pieces. 3i Atlas, despite shedding clouds of gas and metal, remains intact. Its structure holds. Even as it belches cyanide into the solar wind, it shows no sign of breaking apart. This endurance is itself suspicious. A body assembled of fragile ice should not survive such stresses. A body built with intent, armoured in ways we cannot yet see, would. There are whispers in the scientific community that 3i Atlas may not even be hollow, that beneath its crust lies not fragile ice but dense machinery, protected by layers of material designed to resemble cometary dust. If this is true, then every emission we see is the exhaust of a hidden engine, every flicker of green light the glare of a concealed system, every trace of nickel the shavings of unseen gears. In that scenario, the interstellar messenger's chemistry is not an accident of nature. It is the trail of an interstellar machine at work. And if it is a machine, then what kind of machine? Some imagine it as a seed ship carrying the building blocks of life to scatter across fertile planets. In that story, cyanide and carbon dioxide are not poisons but gifts, the beginnings of new biospheres. Others imagine it as a sterilizer, dispatched to erase developing civilizations before they grow too bold. In that story, the same chemicals become weapons. Both stories are possible. Both are terrifying. Because in each, humanity is not the master of the narrative. We are the subject of someone else's experiment. What unsettles astronomers most is the question of whether this visitor travels alone. Oumuamua appeared, then slipped away. Borisov came and went. 3i Atlas has come and stayed in our imaginations because it behaves as if it belongs to a larger pattern. What if it is not singular, but one of many? A fleet of disguised messengers seeded through the galaxy, each arriving at civilizations the moment they step into technological adolescence. If so, then its chemistry is the calling card of a system much larger than we can see, a system that has already noticed us. The interstellar messenger's chemistry, then, is not just a puzzle, it is a verdict. It tells us that 3i Atlas is not like the other comets. It tells us that it has the tools to maneuver, to build, to poison, to signal. It tells us that its endurance is unnatural, its emissions too useful, its patterns too regular. It tells us that what we are watching is not random, not harmless, not ignorable. And once you hear that verdict, it is impossible to look at the faint dot moving through the night sky the same way again. Space brims with enigmas, but they are patient ones, giving us time to measure, to test, to learn. This one is different. Its chemistry has arrived like a question dropped at our feet, one that cannot be postponed. What will humanity do when faced with the possibility that a machine from another star is in our midst, bleeding signals we can half read, leaving trails of molecules that look like weapons and tools? What will we do when the evidence says the visitor is not here to entertain but to evaluate? There are no easy answers. There is only the awareness that every gram of cyanide vented, every atom of nickel released, every burst of carbon dioxide thrust is part of a message that has been written into the sky. The interstellar messenger's chemistry is speaking. We may not understand the words, but we understand the weight. And if we fail to listen, the silence that follows may be permanent. The interstellar messenger's chemistry is a kind of whisper, and the whisper does not fade as 3I Atlas approaches the sun. It sharpens. Astronomers first thought they were watching a faint smudge brighten as expected. But then the readings revealed shifts too precise, too convenient to ignore. Cyanide streaming outward in ever greater volumes, nickel shedding as though from a smelter's vent, carbon dioxide erupting in rhythmic bursts like pistons firing. No natural body behaves like this. Every molecule points toward intention, and intention, when found in the sky, carries weight heavier than gravity itself. Signals of this kind are not meant to soothe. They suggest that 3I Atlas is less a wanderer than a device performing a mission. The regular pulses of gas could be calibrations, tiny adjustments ensuring it crosses planetary orbits at exact intervals. The green glow that persists against the sun's destructive radiation might be less a natural emission than a beacon, a way of announcing its position to watchers elsewhere. To see this chemistry at work is to feel the presence of a system with rules we did not write. The very fact that we can measure it may be the point, as though the object wants us to notice, wants us to draw the conclusion that it is not an accident. Human history offers echoes of this dread. For millennia, comets were omens, warnings written across the heavens in light and fire. Ancient scribes wrote of famine, war, collapse, each time a stranger appeared in the night sky. We dismissed those fears as superstition once science gave us orbital mechanics and spectroscopy. Yet here we are, once again staring upward, confronted with an object whose very chemistry reads like a script of menace. The ancients feared comets because they did not understand them. We fear 3I Atlas because for the first time we are beginning to. The patterns of its emissions pull us toward questions we're not ready to answer. If cyanide is weapon, who is it meant for? If nickel is resource, what is being built? If carbon dioxide is thrust, where exactly is it steering? The interstellar messenger's chemistry forces us to imagine roles for each element, but every role spirals back to the same shadowed possibility, that this is not the byproduct of geology, but the output of design. To imagine a machine dressed as stone is unsettling enough. To imagine that machine carrying tools of creation or annihilation is unbearable. It is not just the substances themselves, but the timing of their release. Observatories report surges that align with orbital milestones, as if triggered by unseen commands. Approaching Mars, a fresh jet erupts. Crossing Jupiter's path, another pulse blooms. This kind of synchrony cannot be shrugged off as chance. It is choreography, each step unfolding as the object advances inward. Every line of chemistry is part of a sequence, and every sequence feels like a plan. We are left in a position our science has not prepared us for. Telescopes can read wavelengths, but they cannot read motive. Data can tell us what is there, but not why. And yet, the more we study, the more the why intrudes. The interstellar messenger's chemistry looks less like an accident of frozen time, and more like the voice of something that has been travelling for ages, waiting to speak only when we were able to hear. What it is saying is unclear, but the tone is not. It is not gentle. This realization presses on humanity's imagination in dangerous ways. Some cling to the idea that the object is sowing life, scattering precursors that could ignite biology on barren worlds. They want to believe it is gardener, not predator. Others see it as an executioner, a device designed to sterilize civilizations before they grow threatening. Both interpretations rely on the same unsettling truth, that 3i Atlas is active, deliberate, responsive. Whichever story is correct, humanity is no longer just a spectator of the cosmos. We are its subject. What unsettles most is the possibility that we are not meant to survive the encounter. A strike at Earth would be obvious, brutal, final. But the chemistry suggests something subtler, more invasive. Release poisons into the upper atmosphere, and life falters in silence. Seed the air with nanoscopic machinery hidden in cometary dust, and civilization collapses without understanding why. The interstellar messenger's chemistry, viewed in this light, is not a side effect. It is a weapon concealed in the language of nature. Perhaps the most disturbing thought is also the simplest. If this chemistry is deliberate, then it has been deliberate for thousands of years, since the object entered the solar system and began its long approach. That means 3i Atlas has been patient, has been waiting, has timed its arrival for now. When we can see it, when we can fear it, when we can imagine what it means. Its message is not only in the molecules it spills into the void. Its message is in the timing, in the fact that it chose to speak at the very moment humanity is ready to listen. And so the sky grows more crowded with questions. Is the interstellar messenger's chemistry a code, a threat, a test, or a mirror meant to show us our own fragility? We do not know. All we can do is watch the faint green lantern brighten, measure the poisons and metals streaming away, and feel the ancient dread return. That something in the sky is more than a rock, that it has come not by chance, and that its chemistry carries not the promise of knowledge but the possibility of erasure. Behind the sun lies a stretch of time we cannot see. Astronomers call it conjunction, the weeks when a body slips into the solar glare and our instruments are blinded. For most comets, this is a nuisance, an inconvenient pause before they emerge again into the night sky. For 3i Atlas, it is something far more dangerous. This object is already shrouded in suspicion, already trailing poisons and metals like signatures of intent. When it vanishes behind the sun, the world will hold its breath. Because behind the sun, anything can happen, and we would never know until it is too late. The trajectory ensures that in late October, 3i Atlas disappears from our eyes just as it makes its closest approach to the star. It is a tactical moment, whether by chance or by plan. While our telescopes are blinded, it gains 6 weeks of privacy, 6 weeks in which its chemistry can intensify, its emissions can change, its path can be altered without scrutiny. For a natural comet, this is the moment when they often break apart under the stress of heat. But for something masquerading as a comet, the concealment is perfect cover. Behind the sun, the comet can maneuver, can divide, can release, can transform, and we will see nothing. The imagination turns dark quickly. What if the regular pulses of gas we recorded before were preparations, calibrations for whatever phase begins in that hidden interval? What if the cyanide emissions were only tests, small-scale rehearsals before a more deliberate release? What if the nickel was not waste but stockpile, gathering in invisible clouds to be collected by smaller machines? The 6 weeks behind the sun are the perfect curtain call. When it emerges in November, the body that returns may not be the one we tracked. It may be altered, multiplied, or carrying companions. Even the timing is suspicious. To vanish at the precise moment when Earth is most vulnerable, when our observatories cannot trace its chemistry, when our satellites are blinded by solar interference, is to gain tactical advantage. If 3i Atlas were a probe sent with intent, it could not have chosen a better stage. The sun itself becomes an ally, a shield of fire that hides its movements. We are left only with silence and waiting. Behind the sun is not merely a blind spot in astronomy, it is a blind spot in human imagination. For those weeks, governments, scientists, and ordinary people will speculate endlessly about what is happening beyond the glare. The not knowing will eat at us more than any data could. Rumours of new sightings, of signals, of sudden atmospheric anomalies on Earth will spread like fire. Some will call it paranoia, others will call it prophecy, but all will feel the same unease, that something important is happening just out of sight. History has always tied comets to moments of transformation. Wars began under their tails, kingdoms fell, plagues were foretold. Behind the Sun, 3i Atlas wears that same mask of omen, but with sharper teeth. We do not fear because of superstition, we fear because of data. We have watched its poisons, its metals, its strange pulse of thrust. We know it does not behave like the relics of our own solar system. And now, just as it reaches its peak, it vanishes into concealment. If it wanted to deepen our dread, it could find no better way. Theories multiply in the absence of sight. Some imagine 3i Atlas releasing swarms of smaller bodies during its hidden passage, scattering metallic spheres like the ones already found crashing onto Earth. Others picture it unfolding, shedding its cometary disguise and revealing a structure beneath, a craft disguised as a stone, now free to stretch wings no telescope can watch. More cautious voices suggest it may simply break apart, but even that offers no comfort. A fragment of an interstellar body moving at 60 kilometers per second is still enough to erase continents. Behind the Sun, even destruction looks like strategy. What unnerves most is that we cannot stop it. If it divides, we cannot track the pieces. If it signals, we cannot intercept the transmissions. If it steers, we cannot measure the correction. Our best instruments are useless when the Sun blinds them, and the blindfold will last for weeks. In those weeks, humanity is reduced to waiting, a species aware that something moves through its neighbourhood, aware that it may mean harm, but unable to see or act. That helplessness is the real terror of Behind the Sun. When November comes, and 3i Atlas re-emerges from the glare, there will be a moment of reckoning. Will it return as a single body, behaving as if nothing happened, and tempt us to dismiss our fears? Will it come back altered, brighter, stranger, trailed by objects we never saw it release? Or will it not return at all, having split into fragments now lost in the Sun's light, fragments perhaps already crossing the Earth's path? Each possibility carries dread. Each possibility is irreversible. Behind the Sun is not an abstract idea. It is a date on the calendar, a countdown we can mark in days. October 30th, 2025. That is when it slips into invisibility, and from that moment onward, we are left only with trust. Trust in our calculations, trust in probabilities, trust in the hope that it is merely a comet. But trust feels fragile when the chemistry has already betrayed us, when every measurement suggests design. Trust becomes a thin shield against the possibility that those 6 hidden weeks are not silence at all, but preparation. And so, humanity waits. Behind the Sun, 3i Atlas continues on its path, conducting activities we cannot witness, leaving us only to wonder whether its reappearance will be ordinary or catastrophic. The curtain of light will lift, and the verdict will emerge. Until then, all we can do is hold our breath and imagine the shapes of what might be happening in the darkness we cannot see. When the object passes into solar glare, the world loses sight not just of a rock but of a story. For 6 weeks it will exist only as a calculation, a ghost pinned down by equations but invisible to the eyes that first revealed it. This absence is a wound in our knowledge. The sky is where we turn for certainty, for cycles that repeat and assure us of tomorrow. Now a traveller from another star slips into the brightest part of the heavens and leaves us with nothing but questions. The unknown has a weight. In those weeks, every strange event on Earth will feel heavier. A glitch in a satellite, a ripple in the ionosphere, a sudden meteor falling through the atmosphere. All will be read as signs, as hints that the visitor is at work while hidden from us. Rumours will grow louder than telescopes. Conspiracies will bloom like weeds, spreading across networks faster than any official statement can suppress. Governments will issue reassurances, but the reassurances will sound thin because everyone knows the truth. No one is watching the thing that matters most. Privacy in space is power. For a natural comet, concealment means little, but for something capable of steering, of pulsing emissions in timed sequences, the sun's glare is an ally. We cannot follow it there. We cannot track if it shifts course or divides. If fragments peel off, we will not know until they arrive. If signals burst outward in hidden spectra, they will escape unnoticed. That 6-week curtain is a shield, and we are left standing on the stage, wondering what script will be revealed when the curtain rises again. The imagination fills the void with scenarios. Some picture the interstellar body breaking apart under heat, scattering debris into orbits that intersect with Earth's. Even one shard would be enough to devastate continents, to darken skies for years. Others imagine it unfolding, dropping the mask of cometary dust to reveal a geometry alien to our eyes, metallic limbs unfurling in the firelight. A quieter theory suggests it may not change at all, that it is already what it intends to be, and the time of concealment is less for transformation than for timing, waiting for the moment when our instruments cannot prove what it does next. This interval is more than astronomical inconvenience, it is psychological war. The ancients feared comets as omens because they arrived without warning and vanished just as suddenly. This visitor does the same, but in a way tuned to our age. We live by observation, by measurement, by streams of data. To be denied data is to feel blind. To feel blind is to feel powerless. And powerlessness is the soil where panic grows. Imagine the world in November. The body re-emerges from the solar glare, but what comes back may not be what went in. Perhaps it shines brighter, its spectrum altered, its tail stained with metals or chemicals unseen before. Perhaps it is not one body but several, trailing in formation. Perhaps it is smaller, fragments scattered and lost in paths we did not predict. Each possibility forces humanity to confront a reality we cannot control. What unsettles most is the thought that the real change may not happen up there at all. If smaller devices have already fallen into our atmosphere, metallic spheres, seamless and resistant, the kind reported in strange incidents over Columbia and elsewhere, then the hidden phase may simply be coordination. The visitor behind the sun could be nothing more than a command hub, issuing orders we cannot intercept. Its silence in the sky may mask activity already underway on the ground. This shifts the focus from astronomy to our own planet. Strange lights recorded by pilots, metallic fragments that should have burned up but did not. Atmospheric anomalies written off as weather. Each take us on new meaning when viewed as reconnaissance or preparation. The thought grows unavoidable. Perhaps the invasion has already begun. Not with fleets darkening the skies, but with probes no larger than beach balls, sensors scattered like spores mapping our defences, testing our responses. By the time the main body disappears, the work of its companions may already be complete. The idea that extinction could arrive as silence rather than spectacle is the hardest to bear. We imagine apocalypse as sudden and fiery, an impact, a detonation, a cataclysm. But what if the end comes disguised as subtle failures? Networks collapsing one by one, satellites glitching out of orbit, grids shutting down without explanation, planes falling, ships stalling, markets freezing. If the visitor has seeded our world with invisible machines, then the 6 weeks of concealment are not about preparing itself. They're about preparing us, softening the edges of civilization before the final blow. What matters then is not just survival, but perception. If enough people believe collapse is natural, the disguise succeeds. If disasters look like coincidences, storms, earthquakes, human error, then resistance never gathers. The most terrifying possibility is not destruction, but misdirection. That humanity spends its final days arguing about causes, while the true cause remains hidden in plain sight. A probe from another star, pretending to be ice, now using the sun as a shield while its plan unfolds. And so the world waits, not for a comet's return, but for a verdict. The interstellar body that emerges in November may glide past harmlessly, leaving us with nothing but unease and stories. It may reappear altered, revealing that our worst fears were justified. Or it may not reappear at all, consumed or transformed into something we no longer recognize. Until then, every passing day is a question mark, every night a reminder that something in our sky has gone dark, not because it vanished, but because it chose the one path where we cannot look. This is what it means to lose sight of a messenger. We measure the heavens with precision, yet here is a single body undoing our confidence by exploiting the simplest flaw in our perspective. When it returns, we will know whether the weeks of blindness were harmless or fatal. Until then, we live in the shadow of possibility, haunted by the thought that the most dangerous phase of its journey is the one we cannot see. Extinction has many shapes. Some are loud and final, others unfold in silence, creeping through the systems that keep us alive until we collapse without even realizing we were under attack. To look at 3I Atlas is to recognize that every one of these shapes is possible. Its mass, its velocity, its chemistry, each by itself is enough to warrant caution. Taken together, they sketch the outlines of endings we can barely comprehend. The most obvious is impact. A body travelling faster than 60 kilometers per second carries unimaginable kinetic energy. The dinosaurs vanished because of a rock roughly 10 kilometers wide, travelling at a third of that speed. 3I Atlas may not be that large, but velocity multiplies destruction. Energy rises with the square of speed, and at interstellar velocity, even a fragment would hit like a world-ending bullet. An impact in the ocean would send walls of water across continents. An impact on land would ignite the skies, lifting dust into the atmosphere until daylight faded for years. Crops would fail, ecosystems would collapse, and within a generation, humanity would be reduced to scattered remnants, if anything survived at all. This is the straightforward scenario, brutal in its simplicity. The object is guided into Earth, and civilization ends in a single day. But chemistry widens the possibilities. The steady release of cyanide into space is not something astronomers can dismiss as trivial. It is poison in the most literal sense, lethal to life at the level of cells. Even small concentrations introduced into the atmosphere could suffocate biology. If 3I Atlas is capable of venting such molecules deliberately, then impact is not even required. A calculated release at the right moment could seed our skies with a chemical haze that destabilizes the oxygen balance, weakens immune systems, or cripples the plants that feed us. Life would not vanish in a flash. It would wither, coughing in invisible fumes. The end would feel less like fire and more like suffocation. The nickel traces point to another scenario, one far stranger. Nickel is the backbone of alloys, the metal of turbines, spacecraft, batteries. It is the kind of substance a machine might need for replication. If the emissions are not waste but material being rearranged, then 3I Atlas may be preparing to manufacture. In that case, extinction would not come from collision or poison, but from construction. Our solar system slowly being stripped to provide raw matter for something we cannot even name. Earth would not be destroyed in one blow but dismantled, harvested piece by piece until nothing remained but scaffolds of alien industry. Human extinction would be collateral, our bodies reduced to resources indistinguishable from iron and stone. Another path to erasure lies in subtle infiltration. Already there are stories of seamless metallic spheres falling from the sky, objects that resist analysis, objects that look more like sensors than debris. If these are fragments deployed by the visitor, then extinction might already be underway. Small machines scattered across continents could map our defences, interfere with our infrastructure, or seed microscopic devices into air and water. The result would not be explosions but failures. Power grids flickering into blackouts, satellites blinking out of service, communication lines falling silent, supply chains collapsing until food spoils in warehouses and medicine cannot reach the sick. In this vision, humanity starves not because of impact or plague, but because the networks that sustain our civilization unravel all at once. Worse still is the possibility of biological infiltration. Life on Earth has always been vulnerable to what comes from the sky. Seeds, spores, microbes. Every exchange of material between planets carries the chance of infection. If 3I Atlas carries engineered organisms, extinction could come through a pandemic unlike any in history. A pathogen tailored not by evolution, but by intention, would need no time to adapt. It could spread invisibly until symptoms arrived everywhere at once, overwhelming medical systems already fragile from other crises. Such a release would not even need to kill quickly. It could sterilize, erasing the future rather than the present, leaving a generation alive but unable to reproduce. Extinction by absence, written into our DNA. Each of these possibilities, impact, poisoning, dismantling, infiltration, shares one trait: speed. Human history is measured in centuries, but cosmic catastrophe works in hours or months. A single adjustment in trajectory could change Earth from safe distance to target in a week. A chemical release in the upper atmosphere could alter climate in months. A disruption of power grids could collapse society in days. We're not prepared for extinction that arrives overnight, and that is precisely what makes 3I Atlas terrifying. The silence of space compounds the fear. If this object is a probe, it does not announce its purpose. It does not send messages, does not negotiate, does not warn. It drifts quietly, its secrets written only in emissions most people will never read. That silence is itself a strategy. A species that does not explain itself cannot be reasoned with. A device that does not signal intent cannot be deterred. All we can do is watch, interpret, and imagine, while the clock runs out. What unsettles more than any single scenario is that we cannot know which ending waits for us. Scientists can run simulations, can trace orbits, can measure gases, but they cannot measure intent. Is this object a weapon sent to sterilize, a machine sent to harvest, a messenger testing whether humanity is worthy of survival? Or is it none of these, merely a fragment of something older and stranger than we can imagine, operating by rules indifferent to us? Each possibility is terrible in its own way. Each is enough to make us wonder whether the story of our species is one page from its final chapter. And so the presence of 3I Atlas becomes a mirror. We see in it our deepest fears of erasure, and every reading reinforces those fears. A trajectory that could easily adjust into a collision course. Chemistry that could poison or seed. Metal that could build. Fragments that could already be among us. Extinction is written into the options like a menu. The only uncertainty is which dish will be served and when. What makes this realization unbearable is that it strips away the illusion of control. We have prepared for war, for famine, for disease. We have no preparation for this. There is no defense against an interstellar body with velocity on its side. There is no antidote for a poison spread across an entire sky. There is no countermeasure for nanoscopic machines already woven into our atmosphere. Extinction, at this scale, does not wait for negotiation or strategy. It arrives as verdict. The thought grows heavier with every passing day. Extinction is not a concept for the far future, not a myth confined to the age of dinosaurs. It is a possibility waiting in the orbit of a single object, one that has chosen to pass through our neighbourhood now, when we're just aware enough to see it and just powerless enough to do nothing. The clock is running, the scenarios multiply, and the story of humanity hangs on the chemistry and trajectory of a traveller we cannot understand. Extinction does not always roar. Sometimes it unfolds with the quiet inevitability of dominoes tipping one after another, subtle until the last piece falls and the pattern is clear. When we imagine the fate tied to 3i Atlas, the mind gravitates to the spectacular, a direct strike, a flash brighter than the sun, oceans boiling into steam. But more insidious endings might already be in motion, endings that do not require impact at all. One possibility is technological suffocation. Our civilization is balanced on fragile networks of satellites, cables, and grids. A single failure can ripple outward in minutes, and we have built a world where food, medicine, and even water depend on uninterrupted flow. If the visitor carries devices small enough to drift into orbit unseen, it could disrupt these networks at their weakest points. Not with explosions, but with interference. Signals bent into noise, circuits fried by electromagnetic pulses, software corrupted at the level of code. The collapse would look accidental at first, a cascade of glitches and outages. By the time the truth became undeniable, cities would already be starving in the dark. Another vision is ecological. The cyanide already detected could be a prelude to atmospheric modification, not in concentrations that kill instantly, but in amounts that shift balances quietly. A small change in chemical ratios could thin the ozone layer, raise levels of compounds toxic to crops, or accelerate warming in ways our models cannot predict. Plants fail first, harvests shrink, food chains wobble, and within years the world finds itself unable to sustain billions. It would feel gradual, like climate change accelerated beyond control, and yet it would all trace back to deliberate emissions drifting into our skies. Then there is the thought of biological sabotage. If seamless metallic spheres have already reached the ground, what prevents them from seeding microscopic machines or engineered organisms? An epidemic unleashed this way would not need to spread quickly. It could travel quietly, dormant in carriers across continents until triggered simultaneously. A single signal from the object as it swings past the sun could awaken hidden programs, turning billions of bodies into hosts for something we cannot cure. Panic would spread faster than the illness. Hospitals would collapse, economies freeze, and in the end, humanity might vanish without even understanding the blueprint of the thing that erased us. There is also the slower horror of replacement. If the emissions we read as nickel are not waste but feedstock, then perhaps the object is already manufacturing. Not weapons, but replicas. Imagine swarms of machines indistinguishable from natural meteor fragments, drifting down in showers, embedding themselves in soil, in oceans, in infrastructure. Over years they grow in number, invisible workers dismantling the world piece by piece. By the time we notice, the planet itself could be remade, not in fire and ruin, but in quiet transformation. A world once alive with forests and oceans, now a lattice of alien industry humming away, using Earth as raw material. In that future, extinction is not sudden death, but dispossession. We survive long enough to realise we're no longer the owners of our home. Even darker is the idea of psychological extinction. A probe advanced enough to cross interstellar space may not need to strike at our bodies. It could strike at our minds. Subtle signals embedded in electromagnetic noise, imperceptible shifts in magnetic fields, chemicals released into the air in doses too faint to detect, all could influence cognition. Societies unravel not because buildings fall, but because people lose the ability to trust, to cooperate, to think clearly. Nations turn inward, conflict blooms, collective action fails. Humanity collapses into chaos, leaving no need for outside destruction. The visitor would not have to fire a weapon. It would simply wait until we finish the work ourselves. What chills is not the novelty of these scenarios, but their plausibility. Every one of them relies on vulnerabilities we know exist, our dependence on fragile infrastructure, the sensitivity of our climate, the delicacy of ecosystems, the complexity of our immune systems, the instability of our politics. The interstellar body does not need exotic weapons if it understands where to press. A single nudge in the right place, and the edifice of civilization topples under its own weight. extinction by misdirection is another path. If disasters can be disguised as natural, then resistance never begins. A storm cripples power grids, and we blame weather. A sudden surge of cancer cases, and we blame pollution. A mass die-off of crops, and we blame climate. All the while, the true cause is a plan unfolding in the chemistry of a comet we mistook for ice. The brilliance of such an attack is its deniability. By the time humanity realizes what happened, the game is already over. The cruelest possibility is that none of this is aimed at us at all. The emissions, the rhythms, the anomalies may not be weapons or tests, but byproducts of a mission we are irrelevant to. Perhaps 3i Atlas is not here to study or destroy, but simply to harvest resources, to test technologies, to pursue objectives incomprehensible to us. In that case, extinction would be collateral, the result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We would vanish not because we were targeted, but because we were ignored. To be erased without recognition might be the most dehumanizing fate of all. And yet, even as these scenarios multiply, what binds them together is not certainty but possibility. The very fact that we can imagine so many ways to die at the hands of one object tells us how fragile we are. One interstellar visitor, one anomaly in the sky, and already we're cataloguing the shapes of our own erasure. That is the real power of 3i Atlas. Not only what it might do, but what it makes us realise about ourselves. That extinction can arrive quietly, dressed as coincidence, masked as natural disaster, hidden inside chemistry we do not yet understand. The Dark Forest hypothesis is a theory that lingers in the background of every discussion about life in the universe. It asks why, in a cosmos so vast and so old, we have not yet found undeniable signs of other civilizations. The unsettling answer is that perhaps we have not found them because those who reveal themselves do not survive. In a forest where every species is armed and hungry, silence is survival, and the safest response to discovering another is to strike before being struck. If this is true, then 3i Atlas is not simply a curiosity from deep space. It is an executioner, dispatched the moment humanity announced its presence. For more than a century, we have been leaking signals into the cosmos. Radio broadcasts, radar pings, satellite chatter. Each one a beacon advertising that Earth is inhabited by a technological species. To us, those signals were signs of progress. To someone else, they may have been alarms. Within a radius of 150 light years, every civilization with sensitive enough instruments now knows we exist. Perhaps one of them decided not to wait. The thought is brutal, but in the cold calculus of survival, it makes sense. Any species capable of travelling between stars would recognise that young civilizations are dangerous. They develop technology faster than wisdom. They harness energy without restraint. They stumble into weapons powerful enough to wipe themselves out, and by extension, capable of harming others if allowed to expand. Humanity's history of war and pollution already paints us as reckless tenants of our own world. Why would an older species trust us to mature? From that perspective, the safest course is not negotiation, not observation, but preemptive elimination. Seen through this lens, the chemistry of 3i Atlas becomes less puzzling. The cyanide is not a curiosity. It is a toxin, perfectly chosen to suffocate Earth's biology. The nickel is not waste. It is material for building the tools of sterilization. The carbon dioxide jets are not random. They are propulsion, guiding the object with precision toward its targets. Each anomaly becomes an element of strategy, each measurement a clue in a blueprint for annihilation. The Dark Forest hypothesis tells us this is not coincidence, it is procedure. Even the timing fits. Calculation suggests the object entered our solar system thousands of years ago, loitering in the outer darkness while civilizations on Earth built cities, invented writing, discovered fire and steel. And only now does it approach the inner planets, at the precise moment when we are reaching for the stars ourselves. The dark forest scenario does not allow for coincidence here. It suggests that 3i Atlas waited until we crossed a threshold, until our ambition became noticeable, and only then began its final descent. The horror of this idea is its efficiency. A single disguised probe carrying the chemistry of extinction, arriving at the exact moment when a species becomes detectable. No fleets, no invasions, no drawn-out wars, just silence afterward. If 3i Atlas is part of such a system, then it may not even be the first. Other worlds, other civilizations could already have been erased in this way, their signals fading into static while no one was left to explain. And what makes the dark forest hypothesis unbearable is that it leaves no room for negotiation. You cannot reason with a strategy designed to preclude reasoning. In the logic of preemptive strike, even the act of communication is a risk. To reveal your language, your location, your technology, is to expose yourself to exploitation. The safest conversation is none at all, which means that if 3i Atlas is here under dark forest logic, its silence is deliberate. It will not answer, because to answer would betray its purpose. This leaves humanity in an impossible position. If we treat it as a natural comet and it is not, we risk extinction through inaction. If we treat it as hostile and act against it, we may accelerate the very attack we fear. Our best defense, observation, is stripped from us when it vanishes into the sun's glare. By the time it re-emerges, the verdict may already be sealed. The dark forest is not forgiving. It does not wait for proof, it punishes hesitation. To imagine this is to realise how fragile we are. All our weapons, our armies, our science, none of it matters against an object moving faster than 60 kilometers per second, armed with chemistry that can poison worlds. The gap in capability is as vast as the gap between humans and ants. We may look upward and see a comet. It may look downward and see a threat to be removed. The forest is dark, and in the dark, mercy is rare. And yet there is one more possibility, as chilling as the rest. What if 3i Atlas is not even acting under the command of a living species? What if it is an automated executioner, sent long ago by a civilization that no longer exists, a machine built to enforce silence across the galaxy? In that case, there is no chance of negotiation, no hope of mercy, no possibility of error. A dead species' fear could be the reason we die, carried forward by a machine that does nothing but obey its ancient programming. This hypothesis has always been a thought experiment, a way of explaining the silence of the stars. With this visitor in our skies, it becomes more than theory. It becomes a mirror for our fear that in a universe where survival is everything, the only safe neighbour is a silent one, and the safest way to deal with noise is to erase it. The dark forest hypothesis takes on a sharper edge when applied to the silence of our own skies. For decades, we have listened with radio telescopes, straining for a signal that would prove we are not alone. Nothing. The absence is usually explained as distance or rarity. But in a darker interpretation, the silence is not accidental. It is enforced. Civilizations that speak too loudly are silenced before their voices can spread. If this is true, then Earth has already crossed the invisible line. We did it not with intent, but with carelessness. The first radar pings from military experiments in the mid-20th century were bright enough to be heard across interstellar distances. Television broadcast followed, leaking out at the speed of light. Our planet became a beacon long before we understood the consequences. To us, these signals marked progress. To an older, more cautious intelligence, they marked danger. A species moving fast, arming itself, about to spread. In the logic of the forest, that is reason enough to act. The presence of 3i Atlas can be read through that logic. It arrives not randomly, but at the precise moment when our technologies begin to reach beyond Earth. It carries chemistry that looks less like geology and more like engineering. Poisons, metals, propulsion. It moves with a trajectory too precise to be chance. Every detail fits the pattern of a preemptive strike disguised as nature. If a civilization wanted to erase us without leaving a trace, what better method than to cloak a weapon in the skin of a comet? This perspective makes even its silence feel hostile. No message, no attempt at communication, no signal of peace. Only a steady approach, timed emissions, and the certainty that whatever happens, it will happen on its schedule, not ours. That silence becomes the strategy itself. Words would invite negotiation. Negotiation would invite risk. Better to say nothing. Better to let chemistry and momentum speak instead. Even so, the horror of the dark forest is not only in the object above, but in what it forces us to admit about ourselves. We too might have chosen the same logic if the roles were reversed. Humanity has already dreamed of sending probes to other stars. If we discovered a young, noisy civilization in another system, would we wait? Would we risk letting them grow, perhaps to outpace us? Or would we decide, in the name of survival, that silence must be enforced? The forest is frightening because it is a mirror. Consider the patience implied. If 3I Atlas has been drifting for thousands of years, its timing is exact. It waited until our species developed technologies bright enough to be noticed. It did not come during the Stone Age, nor in the Age of Sails, nor when we were confined to villages. It arrived now when rockets pierce the atmosphere, when probes fly past planets, when our ambitions are loud. This timing suggests strategy, not chance. In the dark forest, nothing is random. Even the chemistry becomes more sinister under this view. Cyanide is not just poison, but silence in molecular form, a way to strip life from a world without fire or spectacle. Nickel may be the skeleton of tools, material for machines that dismantle us quietly. Carbon dioxide jets are not geological quirks, but steering mechanisms, guiding the body with uncanny precision to where it needs to be. Each element speaks not of accident, but of plan. The unsettling part is that there may be no malice behind it, only procedure. The dark forest hypothesis is not about cruelty, but about survival stripped to its most pragmatic form. In such a universe, compassion is weakness, mercy is risk, and curiosity is fatal. If 3I Atlas embodies this logic, then we are not being targeted because of who we are. We are being erased because of what we could become. The possibility that this process is automated deepens the chill. Imagine a civilization long gone, extinguished by war or time, but leaving behind machines programmed to enforce silence across the galaxy. Those machines do not negotiate, do not hesitate, do not question. They identify signals, they chart trajectories, and they eliminate. If 3I Atlas is one of them, then there is no intelligence to plead with, no conscience to appeal to, only code, carrying out instructions written eons ago. Humanity's fate could be decided not by malice, but by programming. In that scenario, the silence of the skies is not mystery, but consequence. Every star we scan, every world we find lifeless, may have once held civilizations silenced in the same way we now fear. Each vanished culture erased by a messenger that appeared harmless until it was too late. 3I Atlas would not be the first executioner, only the next. We would join a graveyard already centuries deep, our existence noted only as another signal extinguished. This interpretation is unbearable because it denies us hope. If it is true, then we are not special, not chosen, not significant. We are simply loud, and in the forest, loud things do not last. Our broadcasts, our ambitions, our dreams of spaceflight, all of them may have already sealed our fate. 3I Atlas becomes not a curiosity but a verdict, arriving to enforce the law of silence that governs the galaxy. And yet there is a cruel kind of clarity in this thought. The dark forest strips away illusions of cosmic fellowship. It reminds us that the universe is not built to care about us, that survival may depend not on discovery but on discretion. Whether or not this interstellar visitor is truly an agent of such logic, The possibility that it could be forces us to confront the fragility of our position. We are small, we are exposed, and if the forest is real, then the faint green glow approaching our sun may be the last light we ever see. The sky is a stage where stories have always been written. For most of human history, comets were actors of doom, sparks that crossed the heavens to signal plagues, wars and collapses. We laughed at those superstitions once science gave us orbital mechanics. We told ourselves that the cosmos was indifferent, that its motions were blind, that rocks and ice drifting through the void had no interest in our small lives. Then came the interstellar visitor, and suddenly the stage feels alive again, the story less random, the threat more personal. What makes this visitor different is not just what it is, but what it represents. A body hurtling through space at impossible speeds could have been ignored if it behaved as expected. But from the first readings, nothing has been expected. The chemistry is wrong, the trajectory is too precise, the emissions resemble signals rather than accidents. Each measurement chips away at the story of coincidence and reveals a shape that looks intentional. And once you allow intention into the equation, the imagination spins out into scenarios darker than anything the ancients feared. One scenario is immediate erasure. The simplest, most brutal outcome, a strike. At interstellar velocity, even a small fragment would detonate with energy that makes nuclear arsenals look like firecrackers. Oceans would vaporize, skies would choke with dust, and the chain of life would collapse in weeks. Humanity would not decline, it would vanish. But that is only the beginning of possibilities. Impact is crude, loud, unmistakable. If this object is guided, if it is a messenger or a machine, subtler forms of extinction might be far more effective. Consider infiltration. Metallic spheres already reported in strange incidents might be pieces shed deliberately, instruments designed to fall through our skies unnoticed. They resist heat, they resist analysis, they arrive seamless and alien. If they are probes, then perhaps the work is already done. Our defences mapped, our weaknesses catalogued, our infrastructure quietly compromised. The interstellar body itself would then be less a weapon than a hub, orchestrating operations already underway on Earth. In that scenario, the extinction event has begun not in the heavens but in our own backyards. There is also the path of suffocation. Cyanide streaming outward may look small in the vacuum of space, but scaled to a planet's atmosphere, it could be lethal. Introduced in precise doses, it could cripple plants, destabilize ecosystems, weaken entire populations without a single explosion. Death not in fire, but in silence, in a slow unravelling of the systems that sustain life. Imagine looking at the sky and realising the air itself has become toxic, rewritten by emissions released long before we understood their purpose. A different vision is replacement. Nickel drifting away from the object suggests material that could be collected, processed, used. If it is manufacturing, then what emerges from the solar glare may not be the same shape that entered it. A machine can replicate, a machine can multiply. We may not be awaiting a single visitor, but a swarm of constructs, each one designed to occupy space, harvest resources, build infrastructure that does not include us. Extinction in this scenario is dispossession. The Earth remains, but humanity no longer belongs on it. And still darker is the psychological root. A machine capable of manipulating fields or releasing chemicals in precise amounts might not aim to kill us at all. It might aim to fracture us, to break our ability to think and act coherently. Subtle influences on cognition could erode trust, cooperation, sanity. Societies might collapse under suspicion and fear, convinced they are fighting each other while the real enemy watches quietly from orbit. In that ending, humanity is not destroyed from the outside but from within, nudged towards self-destruction by invisible hands. What all of these scenarios share is speed. Extinction is not a slow fade but a sudden descent. Our institutions are not built for such shocks. Wars take years to unfold, climates decades to shift. But collapse engineered by something with interstellar velocity could happen overnight. We might go to sleep under a sky faintly glowing green and wake to a world already broken, the infrastructure gone, the air poisoned, our future erased. This is why the object feels less like a comet and more like a question. It asks us what survival means when the threat is beyond our comprehension. Do we arm ourselves against the sky, knowing our weapons are useless? Do we try to communicate, knowing silence might be the only safe language in a dark forest? Do we cling to denial, hoping that natural explanations are still possible, even as the evidence stacks against them? None of the answers are comfortable, but all of them must be asked because the approach of this body does not allow ignorance. The stage of the sky is unforgiving. In October, the visitor will vanish into the sun's glare. When it emerges weeks later, we will discover whether it returns unchanged or transformed. That interval is not just astronomical, it is psychological. A planet waiting, imagining, fearing. And when it comes back, whatever form it takes, we will know whether the silence of the stars has been broken in the worst possible way. The ancients saw comets as omens because they were powerless. We see this one as omen because we too are powerless. Our science can measure but not stop. Our understanding can grow but cannot defend. In this sense, nothing has changed in thousands of years. We still look upward and see a story written beyond our control. The only difference is that now, we have the language of chemistry and physics to describe it, and that language tells us the threat is real. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that extinction will not announce itself at all. No explosion, no bright light, no final moment to mark the end. Instead, the decline may already have begun, invisible, creeping through our atmosphere, our systems, our societies. The interstellar body glides closer, bleeding signals we half recognize, leaving us to wonder if the countdown is already running. If that is true, then the question is not whether humanity will end, but whether we will even realize what ended us. And so the sky becomes mirror and warning. We watch the faint dot grow brighter, we record the poisons and metals it exhales, and we sense in it not randomness but intent. Extinction has many shapes, and every one of them seems to fit within the shadow of this visitor. To name it comet is to comfort ourselves with familiarity. To see it as messenger is to face the possibility that its message is final. Either way, the story of humanity now shares a stage with something from another star, and the script it carries may not include us. Extinction is easy to imagine as an explosion, something sudden and absolute, a single event that wipes the slate clean. But the more we consider the possibilities tied to the interstellar visitor, the more insidious the endings become. A strike may be the bluntest tool in its arsenal, but not the only one. There are quieter ways for a civilization to vanish, and perhaps those are more efficient. One vision is collapse through dependence. Humanity has built a world where survival rests on delicate systems we can barely maintain in peace, let alone under stress. Power grids connect continents, satellites steer planes and ships, digital networks coordinate everything from banking to hospitals. Cut any one of these threads and the world staggers. Cut them all and the world falls. An object with the ability to seed small devices, to interfere with signals, to disrupt satellites, would not need to throw a single rock at Earth. It would only need to introduce chaos at just the right points, and the structure we call civilization would crumble on its own. Another ending arrives in the form of hunger. If cyanide emissions are a rehearsal for atmospheric alteration, then agriculture is the first casualty. Crops fail in fields, harvests rot, and food becomes scarce. Starvation has always been a slow weapon, but it is brutally effective. Within months, nations unravel under the weight of famine. Within years, populations collapse, leaving only fragments of humanity scattered across a world no longer able to feed them. Unlike an impact, there is no dramatic flash, no crater to mark the end. only the silence of empty cities and abandoned farms. The possibility of infection is more chilling still. A pathogen designed elsewhere, released here, would not look like invasion. It would look like an accident of nature, another virus-leaping species in some remote market or forest. By the time anyone suspected otherwise, it would be too late. A disease with a delayed trigger could spread across continents before symptoms appeared, and once awakened, it would strike everywhere at once. No vaccine, no quarantine, no hope of containment. Humanity could vanish not in a firestorm, but in fevers and coughs, its extinction recorded in medical charts instead of monuments. There is also the ending that does not kill at all, but replaces. Machines seeded into our environment could copy and multiply until they were the dominant life form, quietly converting matter into structures and systems we do not recognize. To us, it would look like decay at first. Corrosion, strange growths, unfamiliar minerals spreading through soil and stone. Then one day we would realize the world itself had changed hands. We would be outnumbered not by invaders, but by the machines of a probe disguised as a comet. Our extinction would be nothing more than redundancy, our role as caretakers of Earth overruled by something better adapted to its new design. Even darker is the possibility of control rather than elimination. If electromagnetic pulses or chemical agents can alter thought, then free will itself is at risk. Leaders might act against their own people without understanding why. Scientists might chase false leads, convinced they are solving problems that do not exist. Societies could be guided like marionettes, nudged toward collapse or obedience without ever seeing the strings. In that world, extinction does not come as death, but as loss of autonomy. Humanity remains alive, but no longer itself. All of these possibilities blur together into one unbearable truth. We may not know extinction when it arrives. Disasters we call natural may already be deliberate. Failures we call human error may be engineered. Illness we call coincidence may be seeded. And by the time we understand, the process will be irreversible. That is the genius of subtle extinction. It does not declare itself. It lets us argue and doubt until the argument is meaningless. The weight of this realization presses hard against the imagination. For centuries, people looked at comets and saw omens. We dismissed those fears as superstition, but now we stand in the same place, haunted by an object whose behavior feels scripted for our end. It is not belief that frightens us this time. It is evidence, the trajectory too precise, the chemistry too purposeful, the timing too uncanny. The visitor carries with it every shape extinction might take, and none of them offer mercy. The truth is that living under the shadow of Ratia is not an ending but a condition. It shapes how we think, how we plan, how we imagine tomorrow. The ancients feared comets as signs of collapse. We fear this one because we know too much to dismiss it, yet not enough to confront it. Every telescope trained on 3i Atlas sharpens the paradox. The more data we gather, the less it behaves like anything natural. And so, the world waits. October 29th, 2025 fixes itself on calendars, a date heavy with expectation. When the object brushes near Earth's orbit, the outcome will not just be astronomical, it will be civilizational. Some will whisper of omens, others will speak of opportunities, but beneath both runs the same current: uncertainty. What happens after that moment is not written yet. Perhaps it will slip harmlessly past, leaving us to wrestle with the knowledge that survival often depends on chance. Perhaps it will alter course, proving in an instant that its presence was never accidental. Or perhaps its purpose will remain hidden, unfolding in ways too subtle to see until the consequences are irreversible. Living under this shadow means accepting that we do not control the script. We are only characters waiting for the next act. And as the curtain rises on the months ahead, the question is no longer only what 3i Atlas is, but what story it intends to write with us in it. When 3i Atlas appeared, the first response was not to act, but to remain silent. A silence born from disbelief, then from hesitation, and finally, from a recognition too vast to articulate, governments convened in quiet rooms, intelligence agencies filed reports with the ink of caution, and scientists delivered data that trembled between natural explanation and existential alarm. But in the space between those words and decisions, the world entered a strange calm, the silence of preparation. It is not the kind of preparation that fills bunkers or forges weapons. Against something moving faster than 60 kilometers per second, the old metaphors of defense collapse. No wall can be built, no missile can intercept, no shield can turn aside an interstellar mass. And yet, people prepare because to do nothing is unbearable. The very act of preparation, however symbolic, becomes a kind of prayer. Consider the military strategists who quietly draft impact scenarios. Their simulations paint the Earth in concentric circles of ruin, shock waves expanding across oceans, skies choked with ash, infrastructures collapsing like brittle glass. These plans are not built on optimism. They're constructed so that if the unthinkable happens, at least the final hours will carry the dignity of coordination. Yet everyone in the room knows the truth. There is no real defense. A planet cannot raise a hand against the cosmos. Then there are the scientists who frame preparation differently. For them, the question is not defense but observation. Telescopes are recalibrated, instruments pushed to their limits, software rewritten to extract every possible fragment of data. The unspoken hope is that in studying Three-Eye Atlas with unprecedented intensity, they might catch a glimpse of intent, or at least enough anomalies to justify funding for more eyes on the sky. Preparation in their case is an act of knowledge. If survival is not guaranteed, then at least understanding should be. For ordinary people, preparation takes stranger forms. Some stockpile canned food and water filters, though they know such supplies would be useless against firestorms or atmospheric poisons. Others withdraw money, convinced that collapse will first appear as a financial tremor. Still others buy land in remote corners of the world, as if distance could shield them from extinction, measured in the curvature of Earth itself. All of these acts reveal a deeper truth. When faced with a cosmic threat, we retreat to the rituals we know: food, money, shelter. The language of survival we inherited from ancestors who feared storms, not comets. Silence, however, does not mean unity. In the shadows of preparation, divisions deepen. Some insist the object is harmless, that the talk of poison and precision is paranoia dressed in scientific jargon. Others proclaim it as prophecy, the fulfillment of ancient texts that promised the sky would one day deliver judgment. Between them stand those who do not know what to believe, but who feel the weight of unease in their bones. The silence is deceptive. Beneath it, millions are shouting in their own ways. Only the shouts do not align. Governments respond unevenly. A handful announce new monitoring initiatives, presenting them as defense programs, though everyone knows they are not. Others suppress the data, fearing panic more than impact. A few lean into spectacle, promising their people that technology will protect them, though the same engineers tasked with drafting solutions know that no such shield exists. The silence of preparation, then, is not empty. It is layered with the dissonance of denial and the hollow performance of control. What haunts most is the sense of timing. October 29th, 2025. The date is repeated in headlines, whispered in classrooms, etched into calendars. Preparation, therefore, is shaped not only by fear, but by countdown. Days are crossed off like beads on a rosary, each one pulling the world closer to a moment no one can predict. The silence stretches between now and then, filled with the knowledge that the outcome is already set yet unrevealed. History offers uncomfortable parallels. Before wars, there is always a pause, a time when nations mobilize quietly, when markets fluctuate, when artists begin to sketch darker themes. Before disasters, there is often a lull, the still air before storms, the strange quiet before earthquakes. The silence of preparation belongs to this family. It is the stillness that does not reassure but unsettles, precisely because it means everyone senses what may come. In homes, families prepare in ways that never make it to official reports. Parents tell children that comets are beautiful, that the green glow in the sky is nothing to fear, even as they lie awake wondering how to explain extinction if it comes. Teenagers make jokes online, weaving memes from cyanide trails and nickel emissions, disguising terror with irony. Lovers plan trips to see the comet with their own eyes, turning dread into pilgrimage. In each case, preparation is less about safety than about meaning. If this is to be the last season, then let it carry something besides panic. Religions also awaken under the comet's shadow. Sermons swell with urgency, interpreting Three-Eye Atlas through the lens of prophecy. Some faiths call it a test of devotion, others a punishment, others still a signal of renewal. Pilgrimages begin, prayers intensify, fasting spreads. Preparation here is not survival, but salvation. The hope that when the sky delivers verdict, faith will tip the balance of fate. But there is another form of preparation, subtler and quieter still. It is the preparation of memory. Archivists accelerate digitization projects, determined that even if humanity falls, its knowledge might endure. Seeds are collected and stored in vaults, stories recorded in dozens of languages, cultural artifacts preserved with desperate speed. It is not survival of bodies that matters in this preparation, but survival of legacy. If extinction comes, let the record at least say that we were here. The silence grows heavier the closer October approaches. News anchors deliver updates with voices carefully modulated to hide their fear. Politicians emphasize resilience, though their own families retreat to mountain estates. Scientists keep watching, measuring, calculating, yet admit privately that intent cannot be graphed. The silence of preparation then is not ignorance. It is a collective holding of breath, a waiting for a verdict written in a language no one fully understands. And yet, within that silence lies an irony. In preparing for a possible end, humanity reveals itself more vividly than in times of peace. We hoard and we share. We deny and we believe. We fracture and we unify. Every contradiction of our species becomes sharper under the green glow of Three-Eye Atlas. It exposes us, not just to the cosmos, but to ourselves. Consider how preparation has already reshaped imagination. Writers draft stories of survival after the impact. Musicians compose elegies for a world that may not last. Filmmakers rush to capture visions of endings while the sky still permits it. Culture becomes accelerated, concentrated, as if the possibility of erasure makes creation itself urgent. Preparation is not only about defense or storage, it is also about expression, about leaving behind the final songs and stories of a species that fears it may be silenced. What makes this silence unbearable is that it may be wasted. If the comet passes without incident, the preparations will look foolish in hindsight. Stockpiles will gather dust, vaults will remain sealed, plans will be archived as curiosities. Yet even then, the silence will not have been meaningless. Because in preparing for an ending, humanity discovers what it values most. Preparation is not proof against extinction. It is a mirror reflecting what we cling to when the horizon darkens. The silence of preparation, therefore, is not simply about the comet. It is about us. It is about how we react when confronted with the possibility of erasure, about how we find ritual in chaos, about how we write meaning into the unknown. Whether Three-Eye Atlas strikes, poisons, multiplies, or passes harmlessly, the preparation itself has already changed the world. It has taught us that survival is not only measured in breath, but in awareness, and so the silence endures. In laboratories, in bunkers, in living rooms and sanctuaries, humanity prepares for what cannot be prepared for. We rehearse for extinction in ways large and small, knowing the rehearsal may become reality, or may dissolve into nothing at all. Either way, the silence of preparation has written itself into history. It is the quiet voice of a civilization waiting for its verdict, knowing that whatever happens next, the act of preparing was never about survival alone. It was about confronting the sky and admitting at last how fragile we are. When the data about 3I Atlas began to circulate beyond observatories, it did not just enter the language of science, it entered the bloodstream of culture. Numbers became narratives, and narratives became beliefs. Where Part 8a dealt with preparations and silence, this is where the noise began, the sound of faith colliding with fear, of futures imagined before they could be proven, of meaning spun from chemistry and trajectory. For millennia, humanity has turned to the heavens for stories. A wandering star was once a god, a comet once a herald of kings or plagues. Even after science stripped those omens of their literal teeth, the instinct never vanished. We are storytellers first, analysts second, and when faced with the most unsettling interstellar visitor in memory, the stories returned, reshaped in modern language but carrying the same pulse of ancient awe. In pulpits and prayer halls, 3I Atlas became a sermon. Some preachers warned that it was the trumpet of revelation, the star called Wormwood falling from the sky to poison waters and scorch the earth. Others called it a test, a trial by fire sent by the Creator to measure humanity's humility. Still others framed it as opportunity, a chance for redemption, a cosmic reminder to turn away from greed, division, and violence. The green glow became not chemistry but symbol of wrath or mercy or awakening depending on the interpreter. For the faithful, fear took the shape of prophecy. For the doubtful, fear wore other masks. Atheists and agnostics found their own myth in the visitor, not divine judgment, but evolutionary selection. If civilizations are erased when they become too noisy, then perhaps the universe enforces its own law of silence. The story here was not God, but pattern, a dark symmetry woven into the galaxy itself. Meanwhile, governments sought to contain the narratives, but culture is not easily managed. Media outlets seized on the comet with the fervour of spectacle. Headlines swung between doom and dismissal. Interstellar visitor could wipe out humanity. Overnight one day, scientists say comet harmless, public panic unfounded the next. The constant oscillation only deepened public unease. People no longer trusted the words of officials because the words shifted too quickly, as if truth itself were being steered. Artists, however, did not hesitate. Painters filled canvases with streaks of green fire crossing over cities. Poets wrote verses about cyanide winds drifting through the heavens. Musicians composed requiems not for what was lost but for what might be. Science fiction authors, long accustomed to imagining hostile skies, produced stories in torrents, worlds harvested by disguised probes, civilizations silenced by interstellar machines, futures where humanity learned to mask its voice in a galaxy that punishes noise. In every case, 3I Atlas was more than a comet. It was a canvas on which fear could be painted, a mirror reflecting what we most dread and most hope. The digital world reacted in its own way. Memes spread faster than official reports. Some mocked the panic, showing stick-figure humans waving at a cartoon comet labelled Doom Rock. Others leaned into gallows humour. Remember to pay your taxes before October 29th. Or, at least the comet will fix climate change. Beneath the laughter, though, was nervousness. Jokes are one of the oldest ways humans tame what they cannot fight. To laugh at the comet was to pretend, if only for a heartbeat, that we still held some power. But not everyone treated it with irony. Online forums flourished with theories. Some claimed the object was a cover-up, that governments already knew it was a probe and were hiding preparations for survival. Others insisted it was salvation, that the comet carried seeds of life or machines that would uplift humanity into a higher order. Conspiracies metastasized. 3I Atlas as alien punishment, a secret weapon as long-predicted harbinger of a new age. In these corners, belief became as intoxicating as fear, and fear became indistinguishable from faith. The futures imagined under the comet's glow fell into two broad camps. In one, humanity was doomed. The visitor was the executioner, the chemistry its blade, the timing its proof of intent. In this story, October 29th, 2025 was not a date to prepare for, but a deadline. The future ended there. In the other camp, humanity was transformed. The comet was the catalyst of change, the spark of awakening. Its approach forced us to face extinction, and in facing it to revalue what life meant. Some spoke of unity, of nations setting aside conflict under the shared shadow of threat. Others dreamed of acceleration, of new technologies birthed in desperation that might outlast the visitor. Whether doom or renewal, the futures imagined were never ordinary. This reveals a deeper truth. The human mind does not tolerate neutrality when the sky turns strange. A comet cannot simply be a rock if it unsettles us. It must be omen or opportunity, punishment or gift. The silence of data is filled with the noise of interpretation, and in that noise, futures are born. In universities, philosophy departments found themselves strangely relevant again. Professors held lectures on the ethics of survival. If extinction is inevitable, what is our duty in the meantime? Should we pursue legacy, leaving behind knowledge for whoever or whatever comes next? Or should we pursue joy, filling our last days with meaning instead of despair? These questions echoed across classrooms, cafes, late-night conversations. The visitor forced people to think not only about death, but about life, about what makes it worth defending and what makes it beautiful even when defense is impossible. Religions, philosophies, and conspiracies aside, there was also a quieter cultural current, the making of personal futures. Couples married earlier, unwilling to postpone vows in case tomorrow was erased. Students abandoned degrees, convinced diplomas would be meaningless in the shadow of a comet. Others doubled down, pouring themselves into work, insisting that progress itself was a defiance against dread. In this way, faith and fear intertwined not in sermons or headlines, but in everyday choices. Futures were rewritten in kitchens, bedrooms, offices, as people asked themselves, what would I do differently if the end might come in weeks? The irony is that this reshaping of the future often mattered more than the comet itself. Whether or not 3I Atlas ultimately proved hostile, its presence changed humanity's trajectory simply by existing. It exposed how thin the veil of normalcy really is, how quickly the idea of stability crumbles when the sky delivers uncertainty. In that sense, the comet did not need to strike to leave impact. Its orbit was enough. What unites all these reactions, faith, fear, futures, is not certainty, but possibility. We do not know what the visitor is, we cannot measure intent, and so we fill the void with stories. Some are ancient, cloaked in scripture. Some are modern, wrapped in equations and simulations. Some are personal, whispered in the quiet moments of daily life. But all are attempts to answer the same question. What does it mean to live under a sky that might erase us? The futures imagined under this question are contradictory. Some are radiant, some are bleak, some are absurd. Yet together they form a kind of cultural spectrum, a collective imagination stretched across possibility. In that spectrum lies our resilience. To imagine endings and beginnings, doom and salvation, terror and transcendence, all at once, is to admit that we are fragile, but also to prove that we are alive. And perhaps that is the truest preparation of all. Not the bunkers or the sermons, not the headlines or the conspiracies, but the act of imagining itself. Faith gives shape to fear. Fear gives urgency to futures. Futures remind us that even in the face of extinction, humanity cannot help but dream. As October approaches, the noise will only grow louder. The silence of preparation will be filled with prayers, arguments, songs, protests, jokes, and stories. And when 3I Atlas finally passes, whether harmless or catastrophic, those stories will remain. Because in the end, faith, fear, and futures are not about the comet. They are about us. They're about how a species confronts the possibility of erasure by refusing to be silent, even under the shadow of a visitor that may yet choose to silence us all. In the shadow of Three-Eye Atlas, thought turns reflexively to the singular. One comet, one intruder, one danger. But step back from the immediacy of fear, and the imagination opens onto a larger canvas. What if this is not a solitary event? What if the trajectory, the chemistry, the precision are not anomalies at all, but signatures of a pattern? To see Three-Eye Atlas as unique is to be comforted by rarity. To see it as part of a system is to face the possibility that we are not witnessing an exception, but an iteration. Consider the statistics. 2 interstellar visitors were confirmed before this century: Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019. Both were improbable, and yet both appeared in rapid succession. Three-Eye Atlas followed not long after, and unlike its predecessors, it did not pass quietly. Its chemistry is deliberate, its orbit suspicious, its timing unnerving. 3 anomalies in less than a decade would be extraordinary enough. But what if 3 are only the beginning? What if the galaxy is seeded with such travellers, each timed to intersect with civilizations the moment they begin to shine too brightly? This reframes the question of the Fermi paradox. For decades we asked why the stars are silent, why the galaxy appears barren despite its age and size. One answer was distance, another was rarity. But a darker answer whispers through the green glow of Three-Eye Atlas. Perhaps the silence is enforced. Perhaps civilizations rise, broadcast, and then vanish, silenced by probes that masquerade as comets, arriving just as voices grow loud. The absence of neighbours may not be mystery, but consequence. The pattern would explain more than silence. It would explain uniformity. If every civilization is culled at the same threshold, the moment of technological adolescence, when signals leak into the cosmos and rockets scrape the sky, then the galaxy would be a graveyard of almosts, worlds that bloomed, reached for the stars, and were erased before they could spread. What we mistake for loneliness might instead be orchestration, a symmetry we only now begin to glimpse because we have reached the same threshold ourselves. Imagine the design. A network of messengers released ages ago, each disguised as natural debris, drifting until gravitational alignments brought them inward. To untrained eyes they would look harmless, snowballs of ice, dust and rock. But hidden within, each carried chemistry too purposeful to dismiss, steering mechanisms too efficient to be chance, emissions too regular to be geological. They would wait in the cold until a young species grew bold enough to detect them, and then they would descend, judges disguised as wanderers. If this is the pattern, then Three-Eye Atlas is not anomaly, but inevitability. It is not the first of its kind, and it will not be the last. Others may already be inbound, their paths hidden behind stars, their signals cloaked in cometary dust. Some may have already passed, unnoticed by civilizations less attentive than ours, leaving behind extinction stories written only in myths and ruins. What we call gods descending, angels punishing, or stars falling in wrath may have been earlier encounters with the same system. Humanity's imagination has always sensed the shape of pattern, even if science could not name it. The unsettling part is scale. To send one interstellar probe is an achievement. To send thousands disguised as comets and spread across light years is a system. It suggests a civilization not only advanced but patient, willing to seed devices across the galaxy and let time do the work. Such a system does not require armies or fleets. It requires only persistence. Over millions of years, every young voice would eventually be heard, and every voice would eventually be answered. The silence we measure today may simply be the sound of that system functioning as intended. But patterns can be read more than one way. Some see the galactic system not as executioner, but as gardener. Perhaps the probes are not sent to erase but to seed, carrying molecules like cyanide that can serve as both toxin and precursor. The same chemistry that frightens us could, in other contexts, awaken life. In this reading, 3i Atlas is not the scythe but the hand that scatters. The pattern then is not of silence but of cultivation, life sown across worlds by machines dressed as comets. The galaxy would still be full of voices, but they would all share a common root. We would not be alone, we would be siblings. Yet even this interpretation carries unease. A gardener is not always kind. Plants are pruned as often as they are watered. A system capable of sowing life might also be capable of weeding it. Perhaps the duality of 3i Atlas, its chemistry both creative and destructive, is deliberate. Perhaps the same machine judges whether a world should flourish or fail. Creation and erasure, seed and scythe, bundled in the same device. The pattern would not be benevolent or hostile but conditional. Life is permitted, but only under terms we do not know. Consider also the possibility of automation. If such probes exist, they may no longer serve living masters. The civilization that seeded them could be long gone, extinct by its own hand or by another's. Yet the machines endure, carrying out instructions written eons ago. This would explain the precision, the persistence, the silence. A dead hand guiding the fates of the living across millennia. The pattern would not be malicious, it would be indifferent. We would face not intelligence but code, a cosmic script still unfolding long after its authors vanished. What makes the galactic pattern so difficult to face is not the science, but the psychology. If 3i Atlas is part of a system, then our choices shrink. We are not dealing with coincidence or anomaly, but with inevitability. One comet can be dismissed as rare, a system cannot. It implies that what is happening to us has happened countless times before, and that the outcomes have all been the same. Survival in such a view is not likely, it is exceptional, and yet awareness itself may alter the pattern. No other species, as far as we know, has measured an interstellar object with such precision, has debated its chemistry, has connected it to a larger system. Perhaps recognition is a form of defiance. To see the pattern is to step outside of it, even briefly. It may not save us, but it gives us the dignity of comprehension. If extinction comes, at least it does not come as mystery. Patterns also raise questions of scale beyond survival. If 3i Atlas belongs to a galactic system, then we must ask, how old is it? How far does it reach? How many have already fallen under its shadow? These questions stretch the imagination into timeframes we can barely hold. Civilizations rising and falling over millions of years, each silenced by the same patient network. The galaxy we dream of as cradle of voices may instead be a tomb of echoes, every silence enforced by the same kind of visitor now moving through our sky. And yet, even in this bleak vision, there is wonder. Because to see a pattern is to glimpse order in chaos, to find symmetry in a universe that often feels indifferent. Whether executioner, gardener, or automaton, 3i Atlas reveals that we are not alone, not in the way we hoped, but not alone nonetheless. The silence of the stars is no longer void, it is presence, heavy and deliberate. The galactic pattern does not reassure, but it does reveal. It tells us that what we face may be larger than our world, larger than our species, larger than our age. It suggests that humanity is not the first to stand under this shadow, and perhaps not the last. And in that recognition lies both terror and awe. Terror, because it means our fate may already be sealed by rules we did not write. Or because it means we are woven into a story older and wider than anything we imagined. As we look upward, and watch the faint green glow sharpen, we must decide how to read the pattern. Is it a system of extermination, pruning voices before they grow too loud? Is it a web of creation, scattering seeds of life across the galaxy? Or is it simply machinery, blind and unfeeling, still at work long after purpose has been forgotten? The answer may never come. But the question itself reshapes how we see the stars. The galaxy is no longer silent. It hums with intention, whether of the living or of the long dead. And 3i Atlas, brushing past our orbit with its strange chemistry and impossible precision, is not just a comet. It is a line in that pattern, a thread woven into the larger fabric. To see it is to understand that the story of humanity is not separate from the story of the cosmos. We are not observers of the pattern. We are inside it. When we look at 3i Atlas and see intent, we are not only describing the sky, we are describing ourselves. Every suspicion we cast upon its trajectory, every motive we imagine behind its chemistry, carries within it the echo of our own behaviour. The fear that this visitor is reconnaissance, a disguised executioner, a silent judge. These are the very strategies we might one day employ if the roles were reversed. 3i Atlas unsettles not only because of what it might be, but because of what it reveals about us. Consider how we already treat our neighbours on Earth. Nations cloak satellites in secrecy, camouflage drones as birds, conceal submarines beneath oceans. Reconnaissance is the precursor to strategy, and strategy often precedes force. When we imagine 3i Atlas as a scout, it is because we understand the logic. Scouts ride ahead of armies. They survey terrain before conquest. They move quietly, disguised as ordinary travellers, so that by the time they recognise their work is already done. To imagine such behaviour in the cosmos is not invention, it is projection. The mirror grows sharper when we think of how we would design probes for interstellar space. Our engineers already discuss self-replicating machines, devices capable of harvesting asteroids and moons for resources, multiplying across systems to carry humanity's reach without waiting for fragile biological bodies. We dream of von Neumann probes, autonomous explorers that could seed the galaxy with our presence long before human beings arrive. To disguise such machines as comets or asteroids would be strategy, not fantasy. Natural debris is common, unremarkable, a perfect cover for reconnaissance. The very logic that makes us fear 3i Atlas is the logic we would employ ourselves. History provides the template. When European ships crossed oceans in the age of exploration, they did not sail openly as conquerors. They arrived first as traders, missionaries, surveyors. Contact was dressed as curiosity, but behind it lay ambition. Indigenous peoples often mistook scouts for guests, only to learn too late that their arrival was the first ripple of empire. What if the galaxy follows the same pattern? What if civilizations expand not with fleets announced in glory, but with quiet messengers disguised as innocents? In seeing 3i Atlas as dangerous, we are admitting that this is exactly what we would do. Even the chemistry we find so menacing, carbon dioxide thrust, cyanide trails, nickel venting, mirrors our own tools. We burn fuels to maneuver spacecraft. We release toxins in war. We scatter metals in the wake of industry. If another civilization studied Earth from afar, watching the signatures of our rockets, our factories, our nuclear tests, would they not also read menace in our emissions? To see danger in 3i Atlas is to recognise the danger we already broadcast into space. The comet is mirror, not monster. The dark forest hypothesis sharpens this reflection. Its central claim is that civilization survive by striking first, by silencing others before they can become threats. Horrifying as it sounds, is this not the same logic humans have practiced for millennia? Preemptive war, deterrence through annihilation, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, these are not alien strategies, they are ours. If we discovered a fledgling species broadcasting loudly from a nearby star, Would we greet it with trust? Or would we calculate the risks, weigh the probabilities, and consider silencing it before it grew dangerous? Our history suggests the latter. To fear being erased is to admit we might choose erasure ourselves. There is also the question of survival. Humanity's relationship with survival has always been double-edged. We celebrate it as instinct, as triumph, as resilience. But survival has also justified cruelty. It has excused conquest, rationalized slaughter, and sanctified domination. We had no choice, the victors say. It was survival. If survival can excuse anything, then perhaps it excuses what 3i Atlas represents. We fear it because it embodies our own ruthless instinct written on a cosmic scale. A species that designed such a probe would not be evil in its own eyes. It would simply be surviving. This recognition does not absolve our fear, it complicates it. Because if 3i Atlas is following the logic we ourselves would use, then the threat is not alien at all. It is familiar. It is human. The galaxy in this view is not a wilderness haunted by monsters. It is a wilderness haunted by mirrors. Every civilization carries the same instinct, to protect itself, to expand, to guard against threats. The silence of the stars, then, is not mystery but inevitability. Everyone hides, or everyone silences. And if we have entered the pattern, it is not because we were targeted uniquely, but because we are predictable. This mirror also raises uncomfortable questions about what it means to mature as a civilization. We often imagine progress as benevolence, that as we grow more advanced, we will grow more peaceful. But the possibility of 3i Atlas suggests the opposite. Advancement does not erase fear, it weaponizes it. It gives survival new tools, new disguises, new efficiencies. A comet that can steer, seed, and poison is simply survival armed with better instruments. Would we be any different if our technologies allowed it? Would we not hide weapons in the guise of rocks, scatter machines disguised as dust, cloak intent in chemistry? Our answer may be written already in the history of how we treat each other, and yet there is another side to the mirror. Just as we recognize in 3i Atlas our capacity for conquest, we might also recognize our capacity for restraint. Humanity is not only war and suspicion. We are also art, cooperation, curiosity. Our greatest achievements, the preservation of the knowledge, the pursuit of beauty, the care for future generations, speak of instincts beyond survival. Perhaps other civilizations faced the same mirror and chose differently. Perhaps not every visitor is executioner. Perhaps some are gardeners, some are archivists, some are messengers. The mirror does not dictate what we must see, it shows us possibilities. But the most haunting reflection remains this. If 3i Atlas is a messenger, then its message may not be directed at us, but about us. By watching our response, panic, denial, myth-making, preparation, it may be gauging what kind of species we are. Do we fracture or do we unify? Do we choose fear or do we choose wonder? In this sense, the comet is both mirror and test. We are reflected not only in what we suspect of it, but in how we behave under its gaze. The mirror of survival is not comforting. It denies us the luxury of imagining the visitor as wholly alien. Instead, it forces us to admit that the cosmos may simply magnify what we already are. If 3i Atlas is executioner, then it is our own logic thrown back at us. If it is gardener, then it is our own impulse to sow life writ larger. If it is judge, then it is judging us by the very instincts we project onto it. In every scenario, we are looking at ourselves, not just at a rock from another star, and perhaps that is the deepest danger. Not that 3i Atlas might erase us, but that in fearing its erasure we come to understand how easily we might erase others. The comet's chemistry, its trajectory, its silence. These are not only signs of what might be out there, they are reminders of what already exists within us. To stare at the sky and see annihilation is to admit that annihilation is within reach of any species ambitious enough to climb into the stars. To see the comet as camouflage is to confess that we too would hide weapons in disguise. To imagine its silence as threat is to acknowledge how often our own silence has hidden intent. The mirror does not flatter, it accuses. What remains then is choice. The mirror of survival does not predict our future, it reflects our present. It shows us what we fear, what we desire, what we are willing to do in the name of survival. Three-Eye Atlas may pass without incident, may strike with finality, or may linger with ambiguous intent. But whatever it does, the reflection it offers cannot be unseen. We have glimpsed ourselves in its shadow, and the image is not entirely comfortable. If survival is the universal law, then perhaps extinction is not the question at all. The question is what kind of survivors we wish to be. The comet forces us to ask, will we become predators cloaked in stone, or caretakers sowing seeds across the dark? Will we silence others, or listen? Will we repeat the pattern we fear, or imagine something beyond it? The mirror of survival hangs above us in the faint green glow of Three-Eye Atlas, and whether or not it erases us, it has already delivered a verdict. We cannot look outward without seeing inward. The cosmos does not merely contain others, it contains the possibility of ourselves, multiplied and magnified, reflected in every visitor that crosses the sky. October 29th, 2025 is not just a date, it is a threshold. For centuries, calendars have marked days of war, of discovery, of collapse, of renewal. But this date carries something heavier, the awareness that the outcome of the sky itself may pivot upon it. When Three-Eye Atlas brushes past Earth's orbit, whether in silence or in catastrophe, humanity will not emerge unchanged. Thresholds are peculiar things. They are moments of waiting, moments when the future hangs suspended, undecided. Standing at a threshold means you are neither inside nor outside, neither safe nor doomed. You are between. That is what the world feels now, suspended between stories. In one, the visitor is dismissed as curiosity, its anomalies folded into natural explanations, its passage a strange footnote in astronomical history. In another, it is the final chapter, the interstellar executioner whose chemistry becomes weapon, whose silence becomes verdict. In yet another, it is something subtler, more enduring, not erasure, but a mirror, a test, a reminder. Each possibility hovers, and none can be dismissed. The threshold moment presses upon daily life. Newspapers track the countdown with bold graphics, even when headlines insist that nothing unusual should be expected. Children ask teachers whether the comet will hit. Economists debate whether markets should price an extinction risk. Couples debate whether to bring new lives into a world whose calendar may be running short. The date has become not merely astronomical but civilizational, an event woven into the texture of decision-making everywhere. And yet the visitor itself remains silent. It does not speak in radio pulses, it does not flash signals across the void. Its only language is motion and chemistry, a trajectory too precise, emissions too deliberate. We read that language through telescopes and spectrographs, interpreting bursts of carbon dioxide as thrust, cyanide as poison, nickel as resource. But the meaning remains elusive. We can measure what it does, we cannot measure why. The threshold, therefore, is not only about survival, it is about interpretation. Humanity waits not only to see whether it endures, but to see whether it understood. History reminds us that thresholds often arrive without recognition. Before Pompeii was buried, its people went about their days unaware that Vesuvius had already begun writing their fate in smoke. Before the Great War erupted in 1914, Europe still believed itself in an age of peace. Thresholds rarely announce themselves clearly. Only afterward do we realize which moment was the line. But this time is different. This time, we know the date in advance. We know when the line will be crossed. That knowledge is its own burden. It is easy to imagine apocalypse as spectacle, a flash brighter than the sun, Oceans rising into steam, firestorms circling the globe. It is harder to imagine apocalypse as absence, the sudden silence of satellites, the quiet collapse of networks, the unseen release of chemicals that make the air unbreathable. Both versions sit on the table, and both are unbearable in their own ways. The threshold does not promise one shape of ending. It promises possibility, a menu of erasures written into the orbit of a single object. But here lies the paradox. Even if nothing happens, even if 3i Atlas sails harmlessly past, leaving Earth untouched, the threshold will still have been crossed. Because the imagination cannot return to innocence. We have measured its chemistry, we have traced its precision, we have suspected its intent. Whether or not it acts, the suspicion remains. Every comet that follows will carry its shadow. Every anomaly in the sky will feel heavier. Every silence from the stars will sound louder. Surviving the comet is not the same as forgetting it. To live through the threshold is to live forever changed. This is why thresholds matter. They're not only about what happens, but about what becomes possible to imagine. Before 3i Atlas, extinction from the sky was myth, a relic of dinosaurs and superstitions. After it, extinction becomes contemporary. It sits not in ancient craters but in present equations. It forces humanity to confront fragility in the starkest of terms. One rock, one trajectory, one chemical signature, and the entire story of our species could end. To see that truth is to step through a door that cannot be closed. And yet, thresholds are not only about endings, they're about beginnings too. To face the possibility of extinction is also to sharpen appreciation of survival, to breathe air untainted, to watch a sunrise, to hold another human hand. These become more luminous when measured against the possibility of losing them. The comet teaches us not only fear, but value. It reminds us that existence itself is extraordinary, that survival is not guaranteed, that the simplest acts of life are profound because they persist at all. In this way, the visitor becomes both terror and gift. It frightens us into awareness. It unsettles us into reflection. It forces us to recognize that we are not invincible, not inevitable, not eternal. But it also reveals that fragility is not weakness, it is meaning. We cherish what can be lost. We value what can end. If humanity were immortal, survival would be trivial. It is precisely because we may vanish overnight that our existence glows with significance. From a cosmic perspective, this lesson is humbling. The galaxy may be filled with patterns of silence, with systems of pruning, with probes disguised as comets that erase civilizations as quickly as they rise. If so, then survival may not be our destiny. But even in that knowledge lies wonder. Because to exist at all, even briefly, in a universe so vast is astonishing. To look at the stars and wonder, to build instruments sharp enough to measure a visitor from another sun, to write stories and fears and hopes into its glow, this is not nothing. This is extraordinary. Perhaps that is the final message of 3i Atlas. Not doom, not judgment, not salvation, but reminder. A reminder that the universe does not guarantee survival, but it does grant existence. That we may not endure forever, but we exist now. That even if the comet is executioner, even if extinction is written into its orbit, we have lived long enough to recognize the possibility. And recognition itself is victory of a kind. So when October 29th arrives and the world watches, it will not only be watching the sky, it will be watching itself. The threshold moment is both astronomical and human, both cosmic and personal. It is a mirror as much as an event. What we see in it, fear, unity, division, wonder, will tell us as much about humanity as it does about the comet. And when the threshold passes, whether in fire, in silence, or in anticlimax, we will still be left with the reflection. The visitor has already changed us by making us imagine our own absence. It has already given us a final lesson, whether or not it delivers a final blow. The lesson is that survival is fragile, existence is precious, and wonder is never wasted. The ending, then, is not only cosmic, it is universal. It does not tell us whether we will endure. It tells us that even if we vanish, our voice mattered because it spoke at all. In the vast dark forest of the galaxy, every fragile spark of life is extraordinary simply because it glows. Three-Eye Atlas may erase us. It may pass us by. It may only remind us of the silence that surrounds us. But whatever it does, it has already written this truth, that to exist at all, for any span of time, is miracle enough. And so we step through the threshold, uncertain, fragile, aware. The sky may deliver erasure, or it may deliver nothing. But either way, we have seen ourselves in its shadow, and that reflection will endure as long as we do.